Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, Mexpatters from all across the globe. I am here with Mr. Anthony. I don't know why I called you
Yes.
Mr. Anthony, but we're going to talk about learning Spanish the right way. So, Anthony actually, he's a fellow gringo like me, has a language school here in Mexico City. So, we're just going to dive into the topic. First, Anthony, how about you let everyone know we were talking in the pre-show? You are in the cold and frigid winter time in the United States. So I'm curious, what brought you to Mexico in the first place?
Alright. Okay. So I originally wasn't really give me out of here.
Technical difficulties.
Little tech. Give me 1 second. I'll be right back. My
All
bad.
right, yeah, you're fine. So, guys, as you're coming in, if I don't see anyone on stream. There we go. We have people coming in. So Anthony's experiencing slight technical difficulties. Feel free to leave any questions in the chat. We're going to be talking about language acquisition. I'm assuming Anthony has a unique methodology for learning Spanish the right way. For those of you who've been on the channel for a while, you know that I studied abroad down here in Mexico. God, 20 years ago now. I'm getting up there in age, but I came across my own methodology as well. It's one that I recommend or advocate to a lot of people that have problems with language acquisition in general. It's not necessarily the easiest thing. However, you will hear lies. People say that, oh, it's hard to learn a language as you get older. I found it's actually a lot easier, although my accent's gotten a little more rigid as I've gotten older. And that's primarily because I speak English during most of the day. When I was down here in school, I spoke Spanish. I did the intensive thing. There was a period where I went 8 months with no English at all. And it was weird when I went back to the US because all of a sudden your brain understands everything. And it was like a sensory overload. So, Anthony, let's see if we have a better connection or a tech setup now. So I'm curious, what led you to Mexico in the first place? What's your Batman origin story here?
So the Batman origin story. It was actually not something I didn't like plan to move to Mexico. So in 2020, like the height of COVID, like basically 2 weeks after it kind of came out, I had a friend who was like, "We should go to Mexico," right? And I was like, kind of chill out. Like, let's see where this goes. But then June of that year, we came down, and I basically never left. I tried to leave at one point. I went back for the winter. I was gonna go be like a snowboard coach in Utah, and my car broke down. It was a complete disaster, and I kind of took that as a sign to come back to Mexico. I was dating a girl at the time, so that obviously helped as well.
A girl in
And
Mexico.
yeah, a girl from Guadalajara.
Oh, did you go to Guadalajara first or come straight to Mexico City?
So when I came to Mexico, I showed up to like Puerto Vallarta. I was in Puerto Vallarta and Sayulita for a few weeks. And then after that, I kind of traveled around for a couple months before I went back to Sayulita. I was in Sayulita for a little while. I was in La Paz for a month. I was in Guadalajara for a month, Puerto Escondido,
Are you a
Chiapas.
surfer? Are you a surfer? Those are surfing
Yes, sir.
spots.
Yes, sir.
You're a surfer from Ohio?
Uh-huh. Weird combination, I know. And I didn't get into any of those sports like surfing and snowboarding until like later in life. Like I was, I think, 19 or 20 when I first started to snowboard, and about the same 2021 when I started to surf. But it's become like a huge part of my life. Like I ended up moving out to Colorado. I worked at a ski resort for 2 years before COVID. And then since COVID, I've been more or less based in Puerto since then. The first couple of years I was down here, it was more like traveling. I went from all over the place, from like out in like Quintana Roo, like Cancun and Tulum and all that good stuff, over to the West Coast. From north, I've been up in Chihuahua, Sonora, Sinaloa, all the way down to the south, like Chiapas and Oaxaca. So I've been kind of all over the place.
Did you already know Spanish before you came down here, or did you? What was the moment where you realized, oh no, I should probably get this language down? If you had that aha moment,
So
and guys, so real quick, I see streamers are starting to come in here now, or live viewers, guys. Feel free to leave any questions in the chat. We're going to dive into the Spanish language acquisition in general. And subs, I see your comment there. Hard to know who to listen to. Everyone says something different. I'm curious what that conflicting advice that you're getting is, and we can definitely address that. So Anthony, my bad. Back to so what was your Spanish language ability like when you first came to Mexico?
so when I first came to Mexico, I pretty much already spoke Spanish. Like I had a little bit of a struggle with some of the slang. But I actually started learning Spanish when I was like 13. So like I have zero like Latino roots at all, like nothing at all. Like I make the joke that like my family is whiter than sour cream, but like zero what to do anything at all to do with Spanish. And I went to school for Spanish. I studied Spanish and linguistics in college. I lived abroad for a year in Spain, and then when I came to Mexico, at that point I was already kind of fluent after coming back from Spain. In terms of like, there wasn't much I couldn't communicate on, from anything from like daily stuff to like even up to like philosophy or like tougher topics like that. And then obviously being here, it got much more fluent and much more like comfortable with it. And also like the slang was a big thing when I first got here. Like I very much spoke like I was from Spain. I had friends who would make fun of me for it, actually. And then throughout the 5 years that I've been here, it's kind of gone away quite a bit.
That's funny. I feel like I speak a fairly standardized Spanish, same as in English. I lived in Texas as a kid. My parents didn't let me develop the Southern accent. I didn't. You don't really think you have an accent when I go home and I hear people say things. I'm like, oh God, like my family speaks different than the way I do. So in my head, I think I speak a standardized Spanish until I go to Colombia or Spain, and people are much like probably your experience. Oh, you sound Mexican. I was like, well, I live in Mexico City. Yeah, I guess that's a good thing. So it sounds like you did the abroad experience too. That's how I learned Spanish. What initially got you interested in the Spanish language? You mentioned you started studying when you're 13. Are you in an area that's high Spanish speaking in the U.S.? Because that was kind of my story. It's like I need to learn Spanish if I want to have a job in my home country.
See, no, like I grew out in the country, so like very white. I think there was, 2 3/4 black people in the entire school I went to. Like none of them were like completely black. It was like half, quarter, whatever. So like definitely not any of that. But when I was 15, I believe, or 16, I went on a missions trip to the Dominican Republic. I was huge into baseball in high school, and so like getting the chance to go to the Dominican
Yeah, I play ball too. Sweet.
Where they have like baseball is like their thing, right? So like for me, it was like that, and then being there and like on this mission trip, it actually started in a much much more wholesome way of me like going to mission trips and like wanting to be able to communicate with people and talk to these little kids and kind of hear their story, right? And then it devolved very quickly into let's go out and let's get drunk and smoke weed and whatever else.
Yeah, that's how my experience was. Although I was pretty good in college. I was serious about academics. I played ball in Guadalajara too. I played baseball. Didn't go to the Dominican Republic. I had a younger brother who's really good at baseball, and he did those Dominican trips as well. Yeah, complete gem for it. Well, I saw something that came up the other day. I guess they do like baseball camps now for kids that are on tournament teams, and I don't think they had those back in the day. So you're definitely ahead of the curve there. I'm curious. Is that your dog barking in the background? Is there any way?
Let me go.
We can get that muted.
1 second.
I'm just watching. I'm just watching the live stream. I'm seeing people come off here. So, guys, feel free to leave your questions in the chat. Once Anthony, we get the audio thing figured out, we'll come and address them. So, Amistad, I see you there. You don't have to learn grammar or focus on grammar or the whole. Only input matters. BS. I don't know if I've necessarily heard that. I'm curious to get Anthony's opinion because we might have varying philosophies on that. I know for me, when I learned Spanish, the first thing I did was learn grammar. I got a book. It's down here 20 years ago, so pre-smartphone and I think Google wasn't even market share leader in search engines yet. So before like the 2007, 2008 real tech internet in your hand type revolution. So I bought a book called 501 Spanish Verbs, giant book, like dictionary size thick, and then I memorized. As an academic, I hated memory and recall type methods of learning, but I just memorized the most commonly used verbs and then started with simple present tense. Get those grammar tables down. Spanish has unique conjugations for every subject pronoun that makes it a little more different than English. So, for example, in English, I want, you want, he, she, it wants. That's the only one that changes in the simple present. They want, we want, like pretty easy. Whereas in Spanish, you probably know yo quiero, tú quieres, él, ella quiere, nosotros queremos, ellos quieren. You're going to have to learn that for everyone. You identify the verbs if they're IR, ER, AR ending, and then usually in most cases they follow the rules. So I did that in the first couple of weeks, just memorized, recall, got it down pat, and then you go to your past tenses. They have two different past tenses. Okay, that caused a little bit of confusion. Then you learn that for the future. Then you learn your present progressive. Then you learn they have a whole new part of the language called subjunctive, which is very difficult for Americans to get down. That's a unique way of So you think you have the conjugations down, and then okay, well, if it's a want, will, desire, need, then there's a whole nother way of doing it. But uh, I always say start with a base. I don't. Anthony, now that you're back, I'm curious to get your opinion. People that say, "Hey, don't worry about the grammar." Think about how you want to communicate in the language, just like your native language. I'm assuming English is your native tongue.
Mhm.
In English, how do you want to be perceived? How well do you want to communicate? I worked on the radio as a kid, so I was really big on speaking, not necessarily correctly, but in a form in which people could understand me. So that was my goal in Spanish too. I didn't want to speak street Spanish, or I grew up on a farm, so I was so happy when I had lived in Mexico for a while and I went home. I was like, I can speak Spanish with the workers. Realized very quickly that they don't speak Spanish well. So it depends. If you want to be perceived as kind of lower education or lower proficiency, then I'd say don't worry about grammar. If you want to actually dive into the language, and there's a class system in the Spanish speaking world too. So if you speak the language well, you open a lot of doors for yourself. So it really depends on what your goals are. Anthony, I'm addressing the question here in the chat. I don't
Mhm.
know if you can see it on your end,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
you hear don't learn grammar or focus on grammar. I'm curious what your take is there. We can start getting into bridge from your early Spanish language experiences into your Spanish language acquisition and methodology and philosophy. I think that's where most of the questions will lie for the audience.
Yeah, so I definitely started out in like a more traditional style of learning, of like learning it in school and doing that like much more like grammar forward focus, of like everything has to be correct. If you're wrong in any way, they're gonna take points off and stuff like that.
Yeah, I learned it that way
And what
too.
I found that led to is a lot of people who I was in class with where they were like able to get hundreds on papers and tests and things like that. But then like if they got called on in class or they were like forced in any way to use it in real life, they couldn't do that. And like for me, language is about traveling. Like I've taught myself now 6 languages, so Spanish, French,
I was,
Portuguese,
I was going to ask you,
Italian.
so you're a true polyglot.
Ha, yeah, yeah, yeah. And so,
Oh,
like for me,
awesome.
it's all about traveling, right? Like I want to go out and meet people and talk to people and be able to enjoy life, you know. And for that, I think that like a grammar forward focus kind of places people in a sticky situation because they're like, oh my god, I need to be correct all the time. Which at the end of the day, that's what you should be striving for, right? But like if you don't, especially in the beginning, like it's not the end of the world, right? And like as far as like learning grammar goes, it is important. Like you want to be able to speak correctly and you want to speak right, right? But like in the beginning, I think the biggest thing you want to go out and focus on is like learning how to handle certain basic situations, like being able to go to the market and order food without a problem, order at a restaurant, get directions, go shopping, like do those like basic like tourist level things. And then from there, once you have kind of a base in the language, like I really saw this when I was learning Arabic. Like the first time I ever tried it, maybe 4 years ago, I tried to like start off learning how to write and learn how to do everything correctly. And I got terribly bored very quickly, right? I just kind of got discouraged and kind of gave up. And then I went to Morocco, and so I kind of learned a little bit there to be able to communicate and kind of do those like basic situations. Like I could ask where things were at, and order my food and whatever. And I found that to be that's a much better approach. Like to focus on like those situations, and then once you have a base in the language, you can then go back and learn the grammar, and it's much easier because you're not just like learning theory. Like this was my struggle with like chemistry, right? Like I couldn't see things, so I was like, I don't understand what is going on here, So like if you have like a base in the language, you can kind of go back and the grammar is much easier to grasp at that point because you're like, oh, I've seen this a dozen times. I've seen this 20 times. I
It
know
starts to make
kind of what
sense.
its
Yeah.
purpose is. Now I can understand the rules and like what is going on and why things are happening. And that makes it much easier.
It's funny you mentioned chemistry. I haven't told that story much on the channel, but I was really good in school, accelerated classes, IB, all that kind of stuff, AP, and I had an AP chemistry class sophomore year of high school, and I struggled insanely because like you said, it was all theory. We were balancing equations. They'd give us worksheets to go home. Incredibly bored, just couldn't get it until one day we had a lab, and then we realized, okay, if you mix this element with this element, it makes the fire this color. Then I realized, oh, I live on a farm, and we have all of these chemicals. So all of a sudden, once I could actually go to the barn and make kind of a home, I don't want to say explosives, but like home fireworks or home chemistry concoctions, all of a sudden I knew how to balance equations. Still probably can't do it on a worksheet today, but I could, like you said, I could visualize it. If I mix this with this and do this, then this is what happens. And I advocate kind of a similar approach to languages. So I was like you, did it the theory way. Took Spanish 4 years in high school. I got down here, realized okay, I can't really speak Spanish. And then my way of going through really just trying to get the basics down. And I've done this recently too, traveling to the Middle East. Or I break it in my head. I was in Israel a couple of years ago and thought, okay, I want to go to the grocery store and just have this entire interaction done in Hebrew. Don't speak any Hebrew, can't read it. It's a completely different language, but you realize there's sequences. And I always tell people new to Spanish or any language, audit your current usage of your native language. In this case, it would be English. So most of the conversations and interactions you have in the day, I mean, you use very few words, maybe 500 words for just like the basic conversations. Go to the grocery store, check out, order food on the phone. That was a big thing for me when I was learning Spanish years ago. Can I order food on the phone and have them understand me? And that it only took a few weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, and I could do that. I could pay my bills. But I was thinking in terms of sequences. So I think especially if you're just traveling somewhere as a tourist or temporarily, I think that's a great place to start. Couple analogies I use. Back years ago when I lived in Guadalajara, I did have a small English language kind of instruction company as well, and I based it the way Chinese businessmen learn English. There's a Chinese simplified English. They just learn the most common words and phrases, and that's the base. And then from there, you can do what I call navigate throughout the culture. And you're not going to have in-depth political conversations or really dive into the meaning of life or things of that nature, but you can get by. And then from there, you have a base. And when you interact in the language, you start to build confidence. And I realized for me early on, I noticed, just like you mentioned, for me, it's always a rule of seven. If I saw a new word or new idiom or colloquialism used at least 7 times, I saw it enough contextually so I could lock it in, form the base hypothesis of okay, this is likely what this means. There are false cognates and things of that nature. Which every new Spanish speaker, you'll say things like, "Oh, estoy embarazada." I was like, "No, you're not. You're not pregnant. You're embarrassed." So everyone goes through that. It's fun, and people know. But I think a lot of times too, it disarms other people because you'll notice as a foreigner, a face like this, when I travel abroad, people they're like, "Oh no, I have to speak English. I'm gonna be forced to speak English." But if I can just kind of eke by, it doesn't have to be good. In their language, it disarms them. Like, oh, he's making an effort, and then most people will normally meet you halfway. They're not going to throw things over your head or try to aha or one up you. They're like, oh, okay, this guy's making an effort to tiptoe into my culture. I will bridge that gap, and I will allow the space for him to come into it. So that's what I've noticed in my language acquisition type experiences in the past. I definitely second what you say. Build a base. Look at the sequences and just be able to navigate and go from there. And then once you actually, language is like music. So once you start getting into it, you'll learn it a lot quicker. When you start to get some wins and build that momentum and build the confidence and have new experiences, I think immersion really is the best way to go. Now I'm curious for those that can't immerse themselves in the language. So you mentioned like going to the Middle East and learning Arabic. What is your prep going into those newer situations?
So
Or
as far
new
as like
languages?
getting prepared to go to any new country, I did this actually twice. I did it in Morocco with Arabic, and I did it in Romanian, or Romania with Romanian, right? Where like my first thought was, and I'm doing it right now with Japanese, which is like my first thought is like I want to be able to handle like those basic situations. Great. Once I can do that, that shouldn't take probably more than 2 weeks, to be 100% honest with you, because again, the point is kind of like meeting them halfway, right? Like you're they realize that you're making an effort, right? And so, like you said, they're not gonna like start using like super hard words. They're gonna kind of meet you halfway and simplify their words and repeat things, right? And so, like once you get through those like basic situations, the things I want to start talking about are like I call it like the traveler conversation, right? We've all been in a hostel or like a hotel or like co-working or something like that.
Where are you from? What do you do? What brings
Where are
you
you
here?
from?
Do
What do you
like
do
it?
for work? What are you going to do
Yeah.
tomorrow? What do you like to do in your free time? Those like basic questions. That's like step 2, right? And then after that, like getting into the past tense, I think is a big thing. Like once you can get into the past tense, like if you think about what you sit around and like talk about your friends most of the time with, it's what did you do last weekend? What did you do today? What did you do on your vacation? Like you're usually talking in the past for the most part, right? So like if you can confidently say like what you're gonna do and then what you did, that's a vast majority of what you're gonna talk about, you know. Um like yes, that you're and another thing you said is like it's kind of okay to like not be 100% correct, right? I refer to it as like speaking like Tarzan a little bit, right?
Yeah.
If you walk into the situation and you're like, me want milk, right? Is that wrong? Yes. Is it close enough to get your point across and get the bottle of milk and whatever you want? Also, yes, you know? And so like
Mhm.
doing that and like, you know, having that confidence to go out and speak languages and interact with people is going to end with you, like you said, chalking up wins for the day, you know, and being able to say, like, even if it's something super simple, like I walked into the restaurant and I ordered the tacos and they brought me exactly what I wanted, right? That's a win for the day, you know? You don't have to be like, oh, you know, was that 100% perfect? Did I get everything right? Who cares, right? You got out of the
And
situation, you wanted out
and
of
they
it.
know immediately you're not from there, especially in a lot of countries in the world. You know, being from the U.S., we have people from all over the world, so sometimes it's hard to tell, you know, if they're from where we're from or not. But in most countries in the world, we don't look like them at all. They're more homogenous cultures, so they already know you're a gringo. They know you're a foreigner, and I think just putting out that effort. I use the analogy or the point as well that, for example, in the English language, a lot like there's more English speakers that aren't native English speakers than there are native English speakers. So if someone comes up to, like, if I'm in California, someone comes up to me on the street, obviously a tourist. Yesterday store, I go today, want mall. Like, okay, I have a pretty good idea. Oh, you went to the store yesterday. It was probably this one, and then the mall. Hey, the nearest plaza is this way. So you can make those assumptions, and you'll notice that most people aren't really rude to you. I know that's a lot of fear a lot of times. And I have noticed that in the unlikely instance they are, then that just means they're low education, they're kind of low culture. Don't take it personally, and it's almost always someone who doesn't speak another language. So in the extreme case, like, hey, we can speak English if that's easier for you. Oh, I don't speak English. Oh, okay, well you're gonna have to be patient with me then in this language.
Aha, 100%. Like I hear stories sometimes from people who are like, "Oh, I feel like people make fun of me." I'm like, "That is wild." I've never, you know, all the places I've been
They
outside of
don't.
France, France is being the big exception. Like I've never had an instance where
Oh
people
yeah.
just look at you like you're an idiot, you know? Like they're like nodding, they're like, "Yeah, okay, I'm trying to work with you and try and figure it out," you know? Like most people are not jerks, you know? And I think it's huge too
They'll encourage you most of the time.
most of the like my experience learning Spanish growing up like was hugely positive. Everybody was like, sick, you're trying to speak Spanish. And I think it comes from the fact that like English is the world language, right? Everybody knows to an extent English, right? Like you probably run into people in Mexico who are like, I don't speak English very well, and then they speak better than like most Americans, you know? Like
Yeah, you
and so
get
I
a
think
couple.
like
I date girls that do that. Oh, I don't speak English at all. And then they get around my friends or my family when they're on vacation. And I overhear her. I was like, you speak English very well. But kind of to this point, Am says the question. I have issues with people speaking to me in English and trying to speak Spanish. What happens a lot of times, so for example, a girl I'm out with, for example, she speaks English very well, but I think in her head, she realizes I speak Spanish more proficiently than she speaks English, so she just defaults to Spanish. So that's likely what you're experiencing to where, okay, that their English, their level of English is better than your level of Spanish. So if it's a friend or someone with whom you interact often, maybe just let them know, hey, you know what, I'm trying to converse in Spanish. Can we stay in Spanish? They'll usually give you that ground. I do that too. I used to always think I'd get self-conscious. In Mexico, as my Spanish degree of proficiency was improving, I always thought, oh no, they're trying to speak to me in English, so that must mean I speak Spanish terribly. But then you realize, okay, for them, a lot of times, English language instruction is very expensive. It's kind of classist. It separates you class wise. It helps them with their careers. So a lot of times, like for example, I go to Fogo de Chao all the time here, and the manager, his English is nowhere near my level of Spanish, but he'll come up to me and insist in speaking English. So in my head, I reframed it to where, okay, I'm making him look good, or I'm elevating his status by speaking to him in English, and I speak to him properly, and we you know we play that game, that nonverbal game. But I'm making his day by speaking to him in English. That's not a critique of me lacking in Spanish. So maybe try approaching it that way as well. Or if you need to, again, with friends, like, hey, you know what, guys, I'm really trying to make a concerted effort to immerse myself in Spanish and get practical conversation whenever I can. My friends here in Mexico will do that with me too. Hey, Jaron, I really want to speak English. And the only time I'll switch to Spanish is if, for example, they're walking out into the street and a car's about ready to hit them, or if it's something kind of like when you're with a little kid, you know, the dad voice, hey, you know, to where or maybe if I'm in a hurry and I'll apologize ahead of time, like, hey, not trying to be rude, but I've only got a few minutes. I need to get this done. But if it were like my mechanic, for example, hey, you know what? I've got a call in 15 minutes. Just stop by to check up on the car. But on Saturday, I'll come hang out. Yeah, we can talk cars. We can practice English. I'm more than cool with doing that. So I think it depends on the situation, and then just setting the expectations there, and then realizing it's not an affront to your lack of speaking Spanish necessarily. A lot of times, speaking English to someone makes that person look good as well.
For sure. I feel like for the most part, it's kind of like what you're saying, like the instruction bit of like, they're just wanting to practice their English, as far as like they don't get that many chances, so they want to practice it. And I hadn't thought about that point of like, if they're at a job, right, and they're like speaking English, well, that's like a bonus for them because they can go talk to their manager and be like, I just dealt with this client in English, give me a bonus kind of thing. My big thing is you just gotta be stubborn a little bit. Like you basically have to. If it's a friend, I agree with that point of like, just tell them up front, be like, hey, I'm trying to practice Spanish. Like, let me speak some Spanish. But like, if you're out in the street and you're talking to somebody, like chances are they are going to want to try and practice the English. And also chances are they only know about 4 phrases that they want to use on you. And at that point, it's just a matter of like battle of the wills, like who's going to give up first and switch languages. Right. So like, if you're in that situation, I always tell people like, you speak Spanish, right? Let them speak English until whoever you kind of battle it out, and whoever has a better control of the second language, well, that's what you're going to end up switching to, right? Because you kind of run out of words, right? But like, let them practice. You speak Spanish. It's also easier to do that. There's like 2 ways you can do like a language exchange, right? Like you can spend like 15 minutes and 15 minutes all in Spanish, all in English. That's like the harder level. Or you can do kind of like that conversation where it's like, I'm speaking to you in Spanish, you're responding in English. Makes my life easy because I don't have to worry about what you're saying. I understand because I speak the language, what you're saying. And so I can just focus on saying things and not like, oh God, I also have to understand what they're saying back to me. So it kind of like behooves you in a way. It is really just a battle of wills. Like whoever sticks it out longer and is more stubborn, that's the language they're going to end up going with, So like just keep talking until
that's definitely a good point. I'm thinking back to my early days in university, because at first you are a little self-conscious, but you start getting some wins, you get some momentum. And then there was a point when I was learning Spanish to where I was like, I got this down to where I didn't have to think anymore. I didn't have to go from target to source language or do translation in my head. I could just put on my Spanish hat and then live in the Spanish world. So there was a bit of a phase that I went through, and I think a lot of Mexicans, Am says, you said, I noticed a lot of Mexicans try to out English each other if I'm around, in a way about classing each other. There is an element of that. I can attest to that. I think when I felt really, I had that aha moment. Like, I don't have to think about it anymore. I don't have to run grammar tables in my head. I don't have to run conversion tables from English to Spanish. I can just speak in Spanish. I can think in Spanish. I can dream in Spanish. There was a slight phase I went through to where, okay, I have to show this off. So, especially around my other gringo friends, going to a resort or something, like, I have this handled, and it was almost performative. But then after a while, the novelty wears off. And it's like, we can speak English or Spanish. I don't
No,
really care. If I'm
100%.
doing you a favor, then we can speak English. I'm completely fine with that.
I noticed that as well. Like when I was in Spain, like I wanted to always speak Spanish. And like when I first got to Mexico, I also was like, I want to speak Spanish so that I know Spanish, right? It
Yeah.
just kind of as it's like performative, right? Like to be like, I know what I'm doing. Like, don't think I'm this dumb gringo that whatever. But like now I'm like much more confident. I'm like, I know I speak Spanish. Like if you want to practice English, that's fine. Go ahead. Like you're not no sweat off my back kind of thing. And just kind of letting
Sometimes
them.
I hold it back a bit. You'll see like diplomatic type relations. So I know there's videos out there of like Vladimir Putin speaking English. He speaks it pretty well, but in official diplomatic type events, he probably relies more on the translators. And I've heard of people doing that, especially in these foreign diplomatic type contextual scenarios, to where okay, it actually gives them a leg up. So a lot of times, if people are speaking Spanish on me, I won't let this happens more so in the U.S. I come from an area, big agriculture area, so 50% of the city is Spanish speaking. Where I'm originally from, so I won't let them know I speak Spanish. We'll start in English. I'm in my country, it's an English speaking country, so we'll start in English, and then I might do the whole conversation, not let them know I speak Spanish, or maybe at some point drop it on them. They're like, "Oh," I'm like, "Yeah, yeah." So, but as we were getting at, you start to outgrow that performative phase there, to where I don't really care as long as we can communicate effectively. I know a lot of people in the intercultural dating context. Anthony, I know you spoke with Joel recently, so he and his girlfriend, he's learning Spanish, she's learning English. They'll eventually meet themselves halfway. With girls I date a lot of times, like if I'm tired or something, or she'll say, "Hey, I want to practice English," and I'll get on her ass. I'm like, "Hey, where's your English?" "Oh, I'm tired. I'll just speak in Spanish." And then sometimes I'll just speak to her in English, and she'll speak back to me in Spanish, and we'll just kind of switch it up just based on how we feel. But realize though, you are doing a cool thing. Am says learning another language. Definitely be proud of that fact, and it almost is like a superpower. And then eventually, it's a tool. You can use it however you want to. There's no hard rules any which way.
My favorite thing, kind of like not letting them know, is when you're like out and about, you hear people talking, you kind of like eavesdrop a little bit. It's happened to me maybe once or twice where like, and I've heard many stories about it happening to other people of where like they speak Spanish good, they understand what they're saying, they're kind of talking a little bit of crap, they're like kind of ragging on whoever is the person listening, like look at this dumb gringo kind of thing. And then you walk up and you ask them something real, like really well in Spanish, and they're like, "Oh crap, did he understand everything that I just said?" And they're like, "Oh no."
I used to do that in Guadalajara. The girls, I went to school there like 20 years ago, so there were not a lot of foreigners in Mexico, especially where I was living. So, girls around campus, they'd be looking like, his beautiful green eyes, and I'd be walking around like I'm aloof, like I didn't know what was going on, and then eventually I'd come up just right in her face, and I'm like, "Hey there, brown eyes, I'm green eyes," or just something stupid like that, and then they'd freeze up like, "Oh, I'm like, yeah." I was like,
It kind of blows their mind when you come out speaking like fluent Spanish. They're like, "Oh, did not expect that party trick." Like of you being able to speak fluent Spanish and like, flirt a little bit and be talkative. So it's kind of fun to be like, act like that dumb gringo and then be like, actually, no, I do know what I'm doing.
and especially in a more globalized world that we live in modern times, I know a lot of times this happened years ago. I think I was in high school, and I'm from the country too. So some kid came knocking on the door trying to sell books or some fundraiser, and he looked like a Chinese kid. He's like, "Oh, I'm an exchange student," and I was there with my mom. We're like, "Oh," and like we just assumed he was from China, and then eventually I think someone called him or something. He was speaking in French. And then we're like, "Bro, you speak French too?" He's like, "Well, I'm from France." And like we thought you were Chinese, but in the way in which people migrate across borders these days, I think it's always safe to assume that you're not insulated in your language. That, oh, this guy probably can't understand me, so I can safely speak about them in my language. It's funny when people do that. I know a lot of people that speak Spanish in the U.S. White guys like us. That you'll get that every now and then. Although I also used to think that, okay, when I was a kid, everyone around me spoke Spanish, and I thought they're talking about me. They must be talking about me. And then after living in Mexico for a while, you go home, and my family does this. We'll go to a shoe store. Mom's like, what is that old lady saying to her son? I'm like, they're trying on shoes. She asked me if that size fits. He should get another size. And then you realize most people aren't talking about you. They're talking about the same stupid stuff that we talk about in our languages.
No, 100%. Like, I don't know what it is about people's like mentality of like when they can't understand a language, their first instinct is that that person is talking about you. And I'm like, what are you talking about the other person? Like,
Yeah,
how,
you're not that important.
right? Like, you're not that important. One, and two, they've got their own life to live. You haven't even, the fact that you're even there hasn't even registered to them, right? Much less given them, you haven't given them enough reason to like want to talk about you. What is so special about you that you think that like you're going to be the center of their conversation?
Yeah, that is funny, and I think it comes from just some of that initial language learning anxiety. Because for me as a kid, I realized very quickly I grew up on a farm, so I thought, okay, I should probably learn Spanish because otherwise I can't communicate with the employees. And I was a young kid, and I was doing a harvest contract, and I went out, and Grandpa's like, "Hey, get the lines evened up, clear the tractor rows, make sure the boxes are stacked, X amount of lines ahead." And I was like, "Grandpa, I don't speak Spanish." He's like, "Well, too bad, better learn." And then just
Figure it out.
like my chores on the farm don't go away because I don't speak Spanish. So as a kid, I think there was some anxiety there. It's like, but it's a good way to do it too. You just kind of have to force yourself. Just figure it out. I know. I haven't watched you and Joel's video yet, but he and I always debate on this, and I can see it going both ways. I know for his point, the question is, do you need to learn Spanish to live in Mexico? And I think his point is not to try to dissuade people. Hey, you can come down here and have little to no Spanish language proficiency. And then my point is, if you really want to live the culture, and for example, I've got a car here, so emissions are due here soon, or I had to go down to the office because there's some construction in the unit above me, and something flew out the window and they're making noise and dogs barking and stuff. So I went down to the administration, and and then in Mexico they're very friendly, so it's not like a 2 minute. Hey, by the way, I've noticed this is going on, and no. They want to stand around and talk about your day, and just talk
Like good
about
old country
small
folk,
small
they want
talk.
to talk about everything. Like they want to know how you're
Yeah,
doing, how your wife's doing. Like
oh, they're very friendly here. So you're able to open those doors, and you're able to get a bit deeper in the culture. And I'm assuming you probably lean more towards my thoughts on the topic because, yeah, hey, I went to Morocco. I learned a bit of Arabic. I do the same thing, even if I'm going to France. Merci, I don't speak French. Merci, but like, it allows you to get in just a couple layers deeper in terms of depth of experiencing the culture and the people. And I think that's what traveling's all about. I'm not one. I'm not a big resort guy, or I'm going to go to a foreign country to do exactly what I did at home. Well, in that case, I'll just stay home.
right. And like even like speaking like a little bit, it's like that you get like a certain amount of respect from the people for even trying, you know? Because going back to the point of like they know you could probably get away with speaking English and like just expect everybody to, attend to you in English, and you're probably gonna get your wish in like 90% of the cases, right? So even you like just throwing out like a thank you, please, like can I get this? Thank you, I want that. Right. Like it gets you a little bit of respect from them. And like you could definitely come to Mexico and not speak a word of English. Like there's plenty of expats that do that, right? Just like there are plenty of like Chinese immigrants or expats or whatever you want to call them in the US who like live in Chinatown, never leave Chinatown and speak Chinese all their life. And, they don't really have a problem with that. You see it with the Latinos too, where like mom, dad, grandma, and grandpa come over later in life and they're like, I'm not going to learn English. Like I live in a neighborhood that is 95% Latino. The people down at the bakery, Latino, speak Spanish. The people at the restaurants all speak Spanish. There's no real reason to, but it also, it like gates you off from a lot of the culture, right? Because like language is so much more than just like the words you say. It's also like access to like the culture, right? The history, the books that were written in that language, films, how people are. You get to know a little bit more like why
The
people
way in
act.
which they experience their world. And I think that is so important to be able to step into their world. And you've probably noticed this. You mentioned you've been in intercultural relationships here. When I go out with a girl and it's mixed company, and then most people from all over the world, English is kind of the default language. So I've had this happen. First time I went to New York years ago, I'm sitting around the table. It's me, Brazilian people, Italian people, Japanese people, Chinese people. English is just the default language. I see that a lot here in Mexico. So if I'm out with my Mexican friends, we'll be speaking Spanish. But if a Japanese person comes into the mix and they don't speak Spanish, we all just kind of default back to English. That's kind of as you mentioned, the world's language. But the ability to be able to step into their reality. I know I have a completely different experience when I'm dating someone and we're around my gringo friends and we're doing mixed languages, and there'll be French and there'll be Arabic and there'll be Italian, all sorts of languages going around. You're constantly code switching. Whereas if I go to like Valle de Bravo, it's a couple hours from here, and I go to like a Buddhist temple, and it's just me and my girl, and we're in Spanish, and everyone around us, and I'm in my Spanish brain. It's almost like I saw a video a while ago. I'll try to find it and put it in the description about it. When you learn a new language, you essentially create another identity. You create a second brain, and
Nice.
there's studies and research that any insecurities or anxieties or even addictions that people can overcome them when they step into their new brain or their new language. And I noticed that I can, for example, if I go to the gym with Joel and we're in English, versus if I go to the gym with the girl I'm seeing and we're entirely in Spanish, it's a different experience for me, although it's the same physical location.
No, I definitely agree, and it's funny that you bring up the different personalities because I definitely went through this with like Spanish versus English. Like I was a super shy kid. Like I did not go up and talk to people. I was not like the one initiating conversation. Like I was just super shy, like locked down, wasn't really out, like very outgoing at all. And I discovered that through like Spanish, like trying to learn Spanish, I became much more. I was much more outgoing when I was speaking Spanish, much more likely to
Me
flirt,
too.
much easier to talk to girls in Spanish. And I think part of it comes from like I could justify it in my head as like, oh, I'm not flirting with this person. I'm going to practice Spanish. And if I happen to
You're
flirt with
stepping
them,
into
well,
a role.
whatever. Yeah. And it led to a point where I was like, I had these two different personalities. And it also comes, so my name is Anthony Chandler, right? And in the US, everybody calls me Chandler, right? And when I went to Spain, I tried to go with Chandler. Nobody could pronounce it well. So I just was like, just call me Anthony. I know you guys can say that. That's fine. And so now anytime I'm in a Latin American country, I'm like, my name is Anthony, right? I go by Anthony. And so it like literally led to like almost a split personality where like English speaking Chandler was very quiet and reserved and closed off. And then Spanish speaking Anthony was much more outgoing, much more flirtatious, much more, I would say things that like never in a million years would I say in English, just like racier comments to girls or whatever. Like it was quite wild. And now I've kind of like mixed them together and I've kind of found a happy medium. But like for a long time, I did have like almost a split personality where like speaking Spanish, I was a totally different person than when I was speaking English.
I remember when I was in college years ago. I think where were we? We went to Guanajuato or somewhere, and there's a girl, and met her at a bar, and we went out, and they had Callejon de del Beso or de los Besos, and went out and pulled her into the Callejon and made out with her, and then she ended up staying the night. And then in the morning, same thing. Her girlfriends came to get her or something, and then I heard her speaking perfect English, and I was like, hey, what the hell? The entire night was in Spanish. Turns out she was from San Antonio, Texas. She's like, oh yeah, she spoke English just like I did. But she told me, she said I was just way more attracted to you in Spanish. And even people I know today, more so in the dating context, they'll tell me that I'm sweeter, I'm nicer, I'm more outgoing, I'm more charming, I'm more fun in
Well,
Spanish.
I,
And I
I
think
think
that's a virtue of the language. Spanish is more emotive too. I feel more emotions in Spanish, whereas in English, I'm kind of level. And people that I know well, they'll tell me if we have to contextually, if I'm speaking English, when I'm done, if I keep speaking English, especially girls I date, like, hey, can you switch back to Spanish? You're kind of an asshole in English. I'm like, oh yeah, all right, cool.
No, 100%. Like, and I think it has to do with like the culture too. Like Latinos are just like more sensual, more romantic. Like it's just part of the
Mhm.
culture. And so like you start listening to the music, you start watching some of the TV shows, you watch a movie, and like that's like you're like, oh, when you're speaking Spanish, this is just how you're supposed to speak. Mi amor, mi vida, mi alma. Like they're just very
I love all
expressive
that
with
stuff.
consent. Like, and they love it. They eat it up, right? Like and I think it's just like the culture. You start to adopt those like aspects of the culture, and you're like, oh, this is who I am when I speak Spanish. I'm more smooth. I'm more talkative. I'm outgoing. Like I think it just has to do with a lot of the culture, even more so than just the
Do,
language in and of itself.
do you ever have the cultures bleed into each other? I do this, especially because you recently went back to the U.S. I know you're back down here in a couple days, but things like I love all the coursey stuff, all the cheesy stuff. In English, it would sound terrible, but sometimes it'll slip out, especially if it's a girl I don't know or she's younger. Kira, I'm like, hey, I was like, hey there, sweetheart, or dear, or doll, or stuff like that. I think in parts of the U.S. South you can get away with it, but I've had that, especially in like U.S. work context. Sweetie, dear, darling, that kind of stuff. But in Spanish, that's just the way you do it. Or I've also noticed, but usually Mexican American friends I have back home, where I'll be saying something in English and they'll be like, "Oh my God, you can't say that," and I'll tell them, "Oh yeah, English is chock full of PC and all of this thought police and language police.
Mhm.
Spanish doesn't have that." So
Mhm.
I'll ask my bilingual Mexican, usually Mexican American friends back home. I'll say like, "Hey, let's do a fun trick. Let's go into Spanish and have this same conversation, and you'll notice that there's no emotional response because that function of the culture does not exist via the Spanish language of, oh, you can't call a black guy black. That's offensive." In Spanish, you know that like, hey, Gordo, like that, they'll just
That's my
call
favorite part of Latin
the
culture is like
nicknames are so
the
fun.
worst trait they can find. If you're fat, you're gordo. If you're the darkest one, even if you're like slightly darker than all your friends, you're el negro. Like they just pick like the
Yep.
most standout trait, and that becomes your nickname.
When
Like
Joel came down here, I told him, "He's like, hey, you're gonna be Chino." He's like, "But I'm Korean." He's like, "But you're Chino." Like
you're
they don't
Chino.
really
You
care.
got you
Yeah,
look Asian. You're vaguely Asian. You're all Chinos. Like
yeah.
it was even the
But
point where in Spain they call the corner stores they call them chinos because they're almost all run by like by Chinese people, right? It'd be like in the US, like you go to a 7-Eleven, you're like, I'm going to the Indian store, something like that.
yeah.
Like
Oh,
and
that's
whereas in English, that would be terrible. You would get canceled immediately.
I
Spanish, nobody
I
cares.
I find it endearing. Joel and I went on a we went on a Spanish channel a couple weeks ago, and I knew in the comments they're going to be 99%. Now, if I read them with my English brain, it's like, oh my God, these people are so racist. They hate white people. But when you switch back in your Spanish brain, it's like, oh yeah, that's how people talk. Like that's how we talk with our friends. They're kind of ball busters here, but it's fun, and I think it's good too. Culturally, it's because I say this to friends in English. I'm not really a ball buster in English, nor in Spanish for that matter, but I understand the cultural element of it is in lower trust societies, you have to know, can this person hang? Is this guy is this guy a wet noodle? Is he going to fold under a bit of pressure and know that I can't trust him? And the easy way to do that is, hey, gordo, ¿qué haces? And like, oh, you shouldn't call me fat because I'm actually trying to lose weight. Like, okay, that got, well, then they're going to call you another word, much more colorful word or colorful words there. But like we're getting at it, I think it's an aspect of the culture. I'm curious. The Am said this year comment here. Any tips to avoid freezing when speaking? In my head, it's proper. As soon as I go to speak, it turns out to be gibberish.
So the biggest thing I can say for this is that's something that tons of people have happen where they're like, oh, I can write, I feel fine, I can kind of say things as I'm like planning my sentences I want to say and whatever. But like the big thing comes down to you're probably not practicing speaking in any way while you're by yourself, right? So like I'm a big fan of like kind of narrating my day to day, right? As I go about things, right? Of talking to myself out loud, I think is a great way to practice speaking. One, because you're getting used to hearing your voice in Spanish, which can kind of throw you for a loop if you're like not used to it. You start speaking in Spanish and you're like my voice changes quite a bit when I speak Spanish, right? And so like
speak
the first
do you speak higher in Spanish? I'm a singer, so I speak more from the mask in Spanish, and then in English, I'm more chest and throat.
I don't know necessarily, but like I think I speak higher in English than I do in Spanish in a
Oh,
way.
really? I went the other way. My Spanish, I'm a couple octaves higher.
And so like for me, like it's like speaking. Like I did this with French, I did it with Portuguese, Arabic. I do it with Japanese. I like live stream on my YouTube channel just for funsies, like just have it so that I can go back and look at it later and like get takeaways and record videos and whatnot. But I'm like sitting there like saying things out loud. My accent probably sounds terrible, right? But it's like getting me used to saying things. It's getting me used to the rhythm. I can hear things, so I'm like, oh, that sounds weird. And it's also like you just getting that practice of like I tell people all the time. I'm like a big fan of like going out and doing activities, right? So like for example, I had a student today. I was like, we've just learned the like progressive, the like ing, walking, talking, singing. So like now for the next 2 days, I want you to go when you're just sitting there and observing, be like, can you tell me what these people around you are doing? Say the woman is singing, the guy is talking, the dog is barking, and things like that. And say it out loud because that gets you used to hearing you say Spanish. And you also get that practice of speaking, right? It's great that you can form it in your head, but if you're not actually then putting that into words and like, because it's like kind of like trying to shorten the delay between the words you're coming up with in your head and you putting them out into the world and saying things, right? And so one way I like to do that is by doing that, is speaking out loud, and even if it's just like super simple things, just like running through scenarios and practicing just to get words out, and get used to speaking and not just thinking in my head, but then taking what I'm thinking and putting it out and actually saying it.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic tip. I did a lot of that too. When I first got down here, I wanted to go out and have as many conversations as possible because I realized that was going to be the way in which I was going to pick it up a lot quicker. And tips to avoid freezing when speaking. I know when I first got down here, you kind of alluded to it too. I was in university, so for me it was take a drink or two, and then Spanish is it's a very loose language, and in English our mouths are very rigid. So for me, it just kind of loosen up the tongue, rolling the R for me. I've done videos on the channel, tips to get that down, but yeah, you almost have to relax your face. And when I have friends come over, I go out. I work remotely, so all my work's done in English. And if all of a sudden I'm speaking in English all day and then I go out, it takes me about 20 minutes for my mouth to relax. And I don't drink anymore, but for my to warm up essentially. I mentioned I'm a singer too. I do my lip trills and all that, and my vocal warm ups and run my scales up and down. But it takes about 20 minutes of me performing to where I'm like, okay, now I can do whatever I want. It's a bit rocky coming out the gate. So realize that is a part of the process. It's something that everyone goes through. People will have patience with you. That a lot of people anywhere you go in the world, they wish they could speak English, or they wish they could speak English the way you do in your new target language. So a lot of times that gives you a lot of leeway. They'll give you a lot of credit for it. I'm trying to think. Thanks for the tip, guys. Do women there prefer foreigners to locals? How about that one? What's your take there?
My big take on this is that it doesn't matter where you go. I think that you are a big fan of what you did not grow up around, right? I did not grow up around Latinos. I love Latino women, like I love Arab women, right? Like it's great. Like I think when you grow up around a certain thing and you're used to it, it's like one, experiencing like a new culture, a new way of thinking, right? And it's also just like you get tired of the same old thing, right? Like dating white girls in Ohio is great, but it's also like we're the same people. We grew up around the same things. We have the same culture. There's not that like interestingness. There's not like that like spark of like, oh, this is new, this is interesting, you know. So I think
It's
it
the
comes down to
other.
like you do get a lot of Mexican girls who like love foreigners, but I don't think it's necessarily like, oh my god, he's a foreigner. I think it's that just like I grew up around Mexican dudes. I knew how Mexican dudes are. They're unfaithful. They cheat. They whatever their complaint might be, you know. And so they have this thought in their head of like, oh, foreigners aren't like that. Foreigners are different. Like I want to, you know, experience that difference, you know.
I think a lot of times too. I know a lot of times with gringos. I actually wrote my thesis on this topic, so I'm not saying I think I know. It was peer reviewed and published, and still gets cited all the damn time because I get the notifications. So I know a lot of times there's positive stereotypes too. So we are known, especially for more kind of Anglo-Saxon background American men. We're known for treating our women well, and like you said, a lot of the you'll hear we're just the messengers here, guys. For those of you who might be watching from like PC cultures, I have a hard time in English sometimes because there's no PC in Mexico. You just say what it is. But I am professional. I do have a corporate reputation, so I have to be careful sometimes. But a lot of the complaints that women make here, to the contrary, there are positive stereotypes that they have a lot of times about American guys. Is that we treat our women well, but a lot of times guys have hard times adjusting to the culture here. They do the 50-50 thing. So if you go on dating apps here, you'll see a lot of women will say, hey, I want an American man, but no 50-50. That drives them nuts. I think for me, the first year I had to unlearn that if she'll cook dinner, she'll serve me, I'll sit on the couch, and then she'll do the dishes and she'll clean up, and then she'll come and cuddle me afterwards. For me, that was really hard as an American to get used to that culture. To whereas now when I go home and I'm in mixed company or with friends and their girls are griping them or she's piping up at the table in my head because I'm so used to living in Latin cultures. It's like, bro, what's wrong with your chick? Like, tell her to chill out, you know?
Yeah, I recently was seeing a girl who like it was my first time I'm aware of like the culture of like guys pay, right, and I've never had a problem with that, but like also too I never been with somebody who's like 100% of the time like I'm not paying for anything at all. Like at the very least you get them kind of pretending to go for the purse or like I'll buy an ice cream or something like something little, you
Yeah.
know, you just spent $100 on dinner, but I'll buy $5 ice cream afterwards, you know. This chick was like absolutely not like everything is being paid for by you, and I was like, this is interesting. This has not been 100% of my experience, you know, of like never reaching for the bill, like never even pretending, just like everything is on you. And so that's definitely like a big culture shock for us coming from America, where like girls will fight you for the bill, you know, like we're splitting this 50-50,
Yeah.
you know. For her to just be like looking at me like you're paying. I was like, oh, okay, that's fine.
And they pay you in other ways. So I know,
Oh,
like
no,
on
totally.
Saturday night, I took out a girl, dropped a bill on dinner, and but came home and did what we did in the morning. We woke up, and then when I was showering, she made the bed and she went and cleaned up, made the kitchen real clean. And my cleaning lady didn't come last week, so she did like a nice deep clean as I was doing my thing. So for me, it's like, okay, that balances out because the time it takes me to make $100 is probably equivalent to, it's probably less than the time it took her to do me that favor. So in my head, I like, and then you'll learn when you're down here, you don't think in terms of keeping score. I don't think that's healthy for relationships.
Think about it.
Anyways, no matter where you are, but I worked in El Salvador for a year before I came back to Mexico. And I was seeing a real young girl there, and I realized that we make like 30 times more than them. That's the minimum to get your residency in Mexico. It's 30 times the Mexican minimum wage. So this girl at the time, she was like, and this will segue into the next question here. Danzer 1282. I think I was like 33, 34 at the time. She was 19 going on 20. So, and she had a little job. But I realized that my teenage jobs, I make nowhere near what I do now when I was a teenager. And the fact that they just don't make a lot of money in a lot of countries outside the US. Even I've worked in Europe too. Europeans don't make as much money as Americans. They have better benefits, but like when you live abroad, like just give me the cash. I want the hard cold cash. But I realized in my head when I was living in El Salvador with this younger girl, so okay, I'll take her out, drop maybe $50 a bill on dinner. But like you said, if she picks up an ice cream or if she picks up a drink or little details. So she was in school at the time, so I didn't see her all week, and then she'd come over on the weekend and she had like a little brookie, like a little brownie cookie thing that was keto because I was dieting at the time. And like those little details to me, that probably cost her about as much as it did for me with the dinner, taking into account, they use US dollars in El Salvador, but the wages just aren't where they are for Americans.
Yeah,
Like 10, 20, 30 times more is what we make than them.
and I think that's an important fact to keep in mind. Like even if you're like making $2,000 a month, I mean you're making double. Like to go to his question here about like the salary, like the minimum salary in Mexico is like $500. Like most professional jobs, like working in an office, are making like $1,000 a month. So like even if you're making $2,000 a month doing whatever you're doing back in the
You're
States,
living
whatever
well.
job, like you're living super well here. And so they like you can kind of get away with like seeming like you live a lot better than you really do kind of in Mexico, because relatively what you earn in the US versus here goes or versus in Mexico goes a lot farther. So like, $100 to spend on dinner is not, I mean, that's a week's worth of salary, of like minimum salary basically. Like for them, but like that's 4 days worth of, salary versus you, it's like, okay, that was 2 hours or hour or whatever it was. It's a big
They
difference.
built a new KFC here on the corner, and it's on the way to the gym. So when I walk past it, they're hiring, and it says 2,000 pesos a week. So for full time, so that's 8,000 pesos a month. It's roughly 17 to one exchange rate. So that's, yeah, like you said, yeah, like $400. Like the rule for me, even when I lived down here years ago, the exchange rate varies. But when I lived in Guadalajara like 20 years ago, I think a good middle income job was like 600 to 800 a month. And then if you're making 1,000, you're upper middle class. If you're multiple thousands, once you do the conversion in pesos, those numbers are a lot larger. But once you do the conversion into dollars, that's a pretty good income. Like if you're making 50,000 pesos a month, you're doing really well. You're VP, senior VP level, potentially at like some major international corporation. Whereas for us, 2,500 bucks, 3,000 a month. I mean, that's below poverty level in the U.S.
Like $2,500, $3,000 a month in Mexico is like dad supporting family and 3 kids, maybe even like a second family.
Yeah.
Like going back to the stereotypes, like that is a stereotype they have. I think it's part of the reason they want to test out like being with like Americans, right? Is because they do have that reputation of like being slightly unfaithful. It was even to the point where like the girl I was dating in Guadalajara, she would like accuse me of cheating and all these girls and whatever. And I was like, look, I understand that's your culture, but like that's not how we're raised, and that's not what we're taught in the States. Like quit saying that. It's kind of insulting. But it's just like their culture. It's what they come to expect.
To the contrary, like guys that want to do like rotational type dating, it's fine. That's what my mom calls it. I did that. I did that for years when I was younger. It's like, oh, Jaron does rotational dating. Having a rotation or having a roster or whatnot. A lot of girls are kind of pre-wired for that. And I've noticed even in other Latin cultures like France, Italy, a lot of like the top guys, they'll have separate apartments for their paramour, and it's pretty common. When I used to go on more kind of dating related channels years ago, people would ask me that question all the time. It's really just don't embarrass her, don't throw it in her face. I live in a nice neighborhood here in Mexico City, so you'll see just gorgeous senoras out and about, and the guy is a lot of times closeted, but it's a public thing, and people just kind of understand that. Mind your own business, but behind closed doors, there's all sorts of other situations or relationship models that people manage. So yeah, do understand that is a bit of the culture here. I think that's why it lends them to a little more curiosity towards gringos. I always have to tell girls here when they ask me like, hey, what are gringo guys like? Because they get their perception of us from the mainstream media. So I tell them like, hey, if you haven't ever been to the U.S. or been in the country, most American guys are pretty conservative. They're Christian. They're pretty solid traditional dudes, but if you look at whatever mainstream slop is out there, then a lot of times that perception will be skewed. Or I know a lot of times with our black clients, they'll ask me like, "Hey, I don't get received well here. And I have to make that point to them. I was like, hey, the only perception they have of your culture or subculture or your background is what they see in mainstream media. And, you guys don't represent yourselves in the best light in mainstream media. So that's the expectation they're coming into in this interaction. And of course, from there, once people meet you face to face, I get the comments all the time. Oh, you're not like how I thought gringos would be. I'm like, well, what do you think we should be like? I mean, I'm me.
It's my favorite comment. The wow, you're not the typical gringo. It's like, yeah, not what you find on social media. That's definitely a plus, like
Yeah, or drunk on spring break in Cancun. Granted, I've been that gringo. I went to college. I've been to spring
be that
break, but
gringo, to be honest.
yeah. But yeah, no. Even when I was in university, I didn't really do that. I was never a huge fan of those types of scenes. So we got the comparison monthly income. Comment on the culture thing. How about the age gap relationships? I think your assessment is correct there, Danzer. It's more permissible to be a wider age gap. I know I grew up in the 90s. So back in the day, it was always, what was it in the US? It's older age divided by 2 plus 7 is like the minimum societally acceptable age. I don't know if that rule still holds true in the US. I spent most of my adult life not in my home country, but yeah, here in Mexico, I'm pushing. I'm in late 30s now, and most girls I date are probably mid 20s. I got to the point personally, like I can date them lower, but they're still kind of in that like, oh, let's go out and drink every weekend party phase. That's kind of annoying to me. So most girls that I date are like right out of college, starting to get their career going. That is more common for the wider age gap. They like men that are a little more seasoned, have a little more life experience. I know back when I used to go on dating podcasts all the time, people would call it daddy energy. I know a lot of times the comments would blow up over that, but really they want that seasoned, more masculine, comfortable in his own skin male energy. And I know coming from the US, I didn't feel like I was an adult till really about the time I hit 30, to where I felt like, okay, I'm comfortable in my own skin. I know who I am. I know where I'm going. I know how to show up in the world. And I don't really have any doubts or questions anymore. I don't have like these out there, these ethereal life questions of, oh my God, identity crises. It's like I turned 30 and all of a sudden like, oh yeah, no, I am who I am. And I think they gravitate, it is cultural, but they gravitate towards that energy. And that could go back to a bit for the fact that wages are lower here. The US is now starting to become Latinized in the sense to where shrinking middle class, very small upper class, most people will be lower middle class or impoverished or servant class. To where like when I was 18, you got out of the house and you got your own place. Now I know a lot of people are living with their parents until later years. So I think it's largely because of that too. It's because it takes men a while, traditionally in these Latin cultures, to become established, to be able to get to the point to where they can support a family. It takes them till mid to later 30s in the U.S. I think we're experiencing that now as well. So that could be the reason why. But Anthony, I'm curious what your experience is. But in my experience, the age gap, that people aren't too worried about that. I've dated girls older than me. I've dated girls my own age. I've dated girls way younger than me. If she's a cool chick, she's a cool chick. And if there's attraction, there is. And if there's not, there's not.
Yeah, I think it goes back. I think the point you make about like the money issue is a big thing. Like I think they see older guys is like more established, more likely to have money, more likely to have that like provider energy, which I think is like a huge thing for most Latina girls. It just being like, what to be like, he's gonna take care of me,
Yeah, can take care of me.
because I mean they are super traditional in that sense of like most of them want to kind of at some point stay home and have a family and raise kids and whatever. And so like that's kind of something they're from the gate kind of looking for. And I also think it has a little bit to do with like the fact that like here it's and most even in Spain it was super common that like people would live with their parents until they're like mid 20s, like late 20s, basically until they got married or had like a serious relationship and move out with that person. And so I think it's that too of like, I'm gonna stay at mom and dad's home until I find somebody. And so if I find somebody who's 3, 4, 5, 10 years older, but he treats me well, takes care of me, and allows me to kind of get out of that space, and also know that in the future when I want to have a family and kids and all that stuff, like I can do it. I think that's like a big plus.
That's a cultural thing too. They're more family oriented here, so you'll see more multi generational families. I know the exception was the university I went to in Guadalajara was a very high income private school, so a lot of my classmates would get married young. There wasn't really the age gaps, but what would happen is we were I was a foreigner, and then the school I went to, it was a direct exchange. So all my credit in Mexico transferred back to the U.S. So I was the exception. I'd go to different faculties and departments across campus because I had to satisfy my U.S. degree requirements. But for those in my same degree path in Guadalajara, they were all in the same classes. Their schedule's fixed, and then they'd rotate classrooms, or sometimes the teachers would rotate. So pretty much all of my classmates ended up marrying amongst themselves, like my immediate classmates. And there was like maybe 15, 20 of us in a classroom max, smaller class sizes at that university. But what happened was they'd get married, and a lot of time the spouse would move in with the family as they're getting their careers, as the man's getting his career established, saving that money to then go buy a house. So they do a lot better job, I think, than gringo culture of ensuring generational success, and there's more multi-generational family living situations. I see that changing more in the U.S. I think it's because of economic need, but I think traditionally these Latin countries, if you marry someone, you're marrying the entire family.
For sure. And I think like you were saying earlier, like the general trend for a long time was like I did it. I hit 18 and I basically moved out. Like I would
Yeah,
go
I did
back to
too.
my family's home for summers or whatever, but other than that, like I was living on my own. And I think that's a huge thing versus like in a lot of other cultures, it's super common that like people stay with their family until like mid late 20s. Make sure that they get off the ground with that career. They can save a little bit of money, buy a car, and do a lot of that. And I think it comes back in a way to like, especially in Mexico, like a lot of people who like now are in their 50s and 60s living like a pretty comfortable, like what I would call like a middle class life. They have a house, they have a couple cars, they go out to eat on Sunday and go to church and whatever. Like a lot of the times those people kind of drag themselves up by the bootstraps from like very impoverished situations. And so they see it as like, okay, well, I don't want my child to go through the same, you know, issue. So if I can let them stay here for 2, 3, 4, 5 extra years and let them kind of get a little bit of a heads up, that's like my duty as their parent. I kind of brought them into the world. Like I need to make sure that they're better off than I am, versus like, for example, my parents, right? When I was, 17, 18, like as a kid, even they were like, when you're 18, like you either go to college or you move out. That's how we did it. That's how our grandparents did it. Like
That's exactly
that's
how I
just
did
the
it.
expectation, versus like they're more, I think here they're more like, I'm going to help my kid a little bit more of like, and I'm not saying like my parents that kicked me out, right? Like if I needed to come home or whatever, that's fine. But it's also like
If I need
much
to go
different.
home now, I can. But I think societally, it's just not seen in such a favorable light.
Yeah, like if I were to go back, and this maybe is my own mental issue, like I kind of see that as a failure, especially at this point, like I'm 29. But like if I needed to, I definitely could. But it's definitely not as societally common or as well
Yeah,
received as it is
acceptable
here.
maybe.
Yeah.
And those are the cultural differences, which again, guys, you will get exposed to via the new language, which is why I always advocate learning Spanish. But kind of like the age gap thing too. I know I've dated younger girls in the past, and I've taken them home, or families come down here, and there's been comments made, and I'm like that's completely normal here. For me, I'm late 30s to date a girl early mid 20s. That's completely normal. There's nothing weird about that at all. To whereas in the US, it seems to me weird that people would like, oh, I have to date someone in my exact age range. I know when I was younger, I hung out with people that were way older than me because I think I was a nerd. So, I felt a little more mature. I was interested in things that people my age weren't interested in. And a lot of girls I date here, yeah, they're younger, but they're in that same boat. They're interested in things I'm interested in. They're not interested in the nightlife or going out or partying or whatnot. I did a lot of smart girls here, so it just makes sense that we're going to pair up together. And then, the quote unquote good ones in more traditional societies, yeah, they get. I'm not going to meet a lot of girls my age like that because they got married off young.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that like comes down to the fact that like the drinking age, right, is lower here in Mexico? It's 18 versus 21 in the States. So like, yes, there's people who go out and like go to college and you go to bars or whatever as a freshman. But like the age in which you start like that party phase of your life in Mexico for some people is like 15, 16. So by the
Yeah.
time they're 20, they've had 4 years of partying and they're like, I'm good. Versus in the States, if you start when you're 21 or 19, you get to 23, 24, 25, and you're still kind of like in that phase.
I can see that because I moved down here when I was 19. So I think when I actually turned 21, I was still down here. I was backpacking through Chiapas, and I don't even think I realized it was my birthday. And then I went back to the U.S. that summer, and people are like, "Oh, you can go to the bars now." I'm just like, okay, like I've been doing the nightlife like I was never a big club guy or bar guy ever at any point in my life, but by the time I turned 21, people are like, oh, you go to the clubs in the US. And like, I've been going to the clubs for 2, 3 years now. It's not really that big of a deal.
Same thing happened to me in Spain. Like I was in Spain when I was 20. I just turned 20, and so like I spent the entire year going out, and then I came back, turned 21, and I was just like, I've done this for a year. This is not really that special. It's not like a big thing. And you see it in like some cultures where like Italians or French people, for example, where they're like, kids are like 8 and they're like, yeah, have a glass of wine. It's like much more culturally accepted of like, not like get drunk, right? But like have a glass of wine because it's like part of the culture. It's not like, not every time you drink has to be like I'm gonna go blackout kind of experience, which I think is kind of a problem in the US of like alcohol is so taboo and hush hush that like when people finally go to college and get access to alcohol, it's like, let's get messed up. Let's be blacked out every weekend, and they just go to the extreme. Versus like I noticed it when I was in Spain, like a lot of the Erasmus students, like they'd have a glass of wine instead of I'm over there taking shots with my American friends and they're like having a glass of wine, having a couple beers and having a good conversation. And I was like, that's weird. But I think it comes back to that of like just having that exposure to it so much younger that like they phase out of it younger as well. They're not like as into it. It's not like, oh wow, alcohol, this mysterious taboo subject.
Yeah, I was kind of the same way in my family. Like I'm American, obviously, but my family's mostly German, and so even as a young kid, yeah, have a sip of wine. Hey, taste this beer, but it was never get drunk. And I think even when I was a teenager, the offer was always on the table, like, hey, don't go out and drink and drive and do something stupid. If you want to drink, do it here. I'd rather have you do it at my house. But I never like when we were kids, I was like, oh, those are the cool parents. Then you realize when you're older, like, oh, those parents were losers. My parents were never like that either. It was more so like, hey, you're kids. We know you're gonna do dumb stuff. We'd rather have you do it at home. And then I think removing that taboo nature, I never really had a desire to do that. I wasn't a big drinker as a teenager, nor in college, nor any of that. I did go through a phase where I drank a little too much, but that was going into the workforce. No one prepared me for that. That okay, if you start climbing the corporate ladder real quick, when you go on these business trips, oh my God, there's a drinking culture there, and I was not prepared for that. So I think since I did most of my college experience in Mexico, I didn't have the traditional U.S. college experience. I had that when I entered the workforce, to where like, oh my God, all these, my senior managers are pulling out black cards and running up bar tabs in these really swanky places and these exotic towns. And that was fun. I partook in that. And then you go back home. Whereas in the US, you binge drink in your college days, then you go start your life and now you have a drinking problem. I think that happened to me once I entered more of the corporate workforce. Like, oh, like I'm getting paid to go out and drink. It's a part of my job. I can take clients out and wine and dine them. And then I realized, yeah, no, I need to not do this. So I never had a drinking problem, but I realized like that my binge drinking, it was very short lived. It was more kind of like as I was establishing my career than college.
I noticed it in college, and I definitely noticed it afterwards to the point of like it never like, oh, I need to like I've had friends who are like, I need to have a beer or 7 every day or I just can't operate. I was never like that, but like definitely that like college binge drinking culture of like anytime we go out, I'm getting royally messed up. It led to some problems a little bit later on of just like being like, okay, I need to chill, I need to calm down. And that definitely led to me like taking like some sober periods, which I think is important, to be able to, take 5 months or 6 months or whatever. And then just be like, I'm not going to touch alcohol. I'm not going to smoke weed. I'm not going to do whatever, no cocaine, no whatever, no nicotine, and just kind of leave it. I think that's an important aspect too.
Yeah,
Take that
I'm
space.
kind of going through one of those. That's more so like me as I'm getting older. It's like, you know what? I don't need alcohol. I don't need substances. They were fun. They served their purpose. Got a lot of value out of them. Made some dumb decisions using them as well. But as I'm evolving into the next chapter of my life, I'm like, God, I don't really need this stuff. I want to operate from of a higher consciousness. Which that fantastic topic for Joel, guys that don't know, Joel, he's the co-owner of this channel. You've probably been seeing more of him lately than you have I. He has another channel called Sobriety University. So we've talking about those topics. Let me know in the chat, or if you're watching this video after the fact, after the live stream, if those are topics you're interested in. We every now and then we get clients that come down here, how to deal with substances in the intercultural dating context. I'd definitely be open to talking about those topics. Anthony, you're definitely welcome to join us again. It's been a fantastic conversation. Denzer 1282 for an expat like you, do you prefer to drive car, motorcycle, or just walk and take public transportation? For me, that depends on where you live. So in Mexico City, it's like in New York. You don't really need a car. I do like cars. I'm from the West Coast, a big car culture out there. So after I had been here for like 4 years already, I did buy a car last year. I only take it out on the weekends when there's not as much traffic, or like a quick little getaway, an hour, 2 hours outside of town. I'll take it on spirited drives. So it's a 20-year-old cash car, but it's still a nice car. I waited, I took my time and looked for it. I bought a convertible, a little roadster. So if it's a nice sunny day and there's no traffic, or Mexico has a lot of holidays. So when it's a holiday and everyone leaves town to go back to their hometowns, then yeah, I'll take it out and have free reign of Mexico City in my little convertible. But in terms of getting around, if it's during the week, traffic wasn't too bad today around where I live, but traffic's normally horrendous. If I have, I'll plan my travel to where I don't have to leave my neighborhood during the week. If I do, I'll take an Uber because I'd rather just like catch up on email or comments on the channel in the comfort of a backseat of an Uber rather than having to sit at a light and wait for 18 cycles to go half a kilometer. I don't want to do that. So that's my take on a car. Anthony, do you have a car here in Mexico City, or
I don't have a
carriers that we
car.
consider?
When I'm in Mexico City, I'm definitely more the route of like Ubers. They have a super great bike system. Like you can pick up
Yeah,
bikes basically every 3 or 4
Ecobici.
blocks. Or take an Uber. Public transport, specifically like the Metro bus, I think is a great system because it kind of lets you like skip all the cars and all the traffic. The
Mexico's well
Metro can be a little
connected in
sketchy,
general as a country.
but the Metro is really good in all reality. In Puerto Escondido, I have a motorcycle though because like it's a little bit more out there. I think if you're not in
Yeah,
like a big city, it is kind of nice to have wheels, like whether that's a scooter or a bike or whatever. And like this is like a 150cc, it's not like some big
yeah,
crazy bike, it's just a grocery getter. But it is really nice to have that because otherwise you're relying on like rather inconsistent and nobody knows actually when these things are going to pass public transit. Um, but like in the city, definitely not a thing you need at all.
yeah. So it depends on where you live. I've got a good buddy that lives in Tulum. Tulum's like the U.S. Like it's like going to Texas. I was just in Texas a couple weeks ago. You need a car in Texas, even if you're in the city. The cities are wide and expansive. You'll look on a map, and what looks like a block away is a mile away in Texas. Tulum's kind of the same way. So my buddy bought a Jeep out there, I think it came. I think the owner he worked into his rental deal. It was like one of the owner's backup cars or something. So really depends on where you're going, what kind of lifestyle you do. If you're coming to Mexico City, I recommend. Pony up the extra cash. Live in the neighborhood where you'll be spending most of your time. So that's what I do. If I have to go out, all the main plazas are here. My gym's a few blocks away. All the little coffee shops are down here. The park is, 10, 15-minute walk. So anything I need, I can get faster walking than taking the car out. But I am an American. I am a car guy. In Mexico City, they have like no circulation days, although I got the unrestricted version. For the plates of my car. So take all that into consideration. I'd say if you're just stopping by on an exploratory trip, if you're touristing, don't worry about it. Ubers are fine. Public transport is great here. A lot of times it's more efficient than, the traffic is next level. It's some of the worst traffic in the world. But I had lived here for 4 years already. I was like, you know what? I want to get into the car scene. So I'll go hang out with my mechanic on Saturday and we'll wrench on the car. And then the BMW and Porsche Club, I'll go out and rally with those guys and, take it up in the mountains and, let it loose, let it run a little bit. So, but that's just because me personally, I've always been a car person. I'd say you definitely don't need one. If you live in Mexico City, depends on where you live. Did you go to Tequila when you lived in Guadalajara? Yes, I've been to Tequila. I've done the Tequila train. I've gotten in the car with my classmates and gone out there. Start the day at like 10 a.m. And then they're giving you the samples, and then by 2 p.m. you're like, oh, well, I'm tanked. So, yep, definitely did that in Guadalajara. Joel, hey, nice to join the stream. Get up, boys. Well, we'll have to do a stream with the three of us at some point. But let's. I think. Well, I like to keep this about an hour, but I also don't want to cap them if the conversation's going. I think let's try to bring it a little more back towards language acquisition. And Anthony, I'm curious. You have a language school, so what started that? What does that entail? How can people get more information on that? Tips for people starting out Spanish. Language acquisition. I know I can talk all day. I've guys that have followed me for a while talk about like conversion tables, my methodology. So I'm curious if you employ a similar methodology. Guys, let us know if you have any last questions in the chat. if you're watching this after the fact, leave comments. We can certainly get on another stream or do standalone videos or what have you. We're here to serve, and just really, I personally like the intercultural topic, so that's my bad for getting a bit off track, but I can certainly keep going as well.
No, I mean the cultural stuff is important. You know what I'm saying. But as far as the language school goes, this is something I started originally. It just started as me like kind of giving English and Spanish classes. It's like when I was just trying not to burn through my savings as quickly as I was at the beginning, and it just kind of caught on. I started to really focus on the expats and the people who were coming from the U.S. I found it really quite annoying the people who had been here for 2, 3, 5, 10 years and still can barely order tacos. I think that's really really dumb. I think that you could drop most people. I could drop myself and anybody out here who's watching this stream. If me and you went to China, we could learn to kind of navigate China in about 2 weeks. I think, as far as like being able to handle
2 or 3 weeks.
The basic scenarios, and maybe another month to get like, okay, I can kind of have like a basic conversation of like, what are you doing? Where are you from? What do you like to do? Like those kind of basic things, Like I think that's pretty easy. I'm actually recording this whole process with Japanese right now on my channel, so. But if you guys are interested in Spanish, like I definitely go for more of a communicative first approach, building on like he said at the beginning, kind of those like very common patterns, right? And just kind of building it. It's kind of like Legos, like you review a little bit and then you build another layer on top. Okay, the next day you review that layer and then you build another layer or two on top, and kind of going through those like most common use language skills of like being able to talk about what I'm going to do this weekend, what I want to do this weekend, what I did last weekend. And then from there, it becomes more of like an issue of like, you need to read more, and so we start to get more into reading. And if you guys are interested in checking it out, it's Nomad Language Academy on Instagram, TikTok. That gives links to the YouTube, which is Anthony Mullis, Mullis. And then nomadlanguageacademy.com as well. And I'll send a link as well if you guys want to schedule like a consult and talk a little bit more about what you guys are looking for. And if you're looking to sign up for some classes, I'll leave a link down below with these guys so you can get a call scheduled.
Do you do English language instruction too? Because there are local people here in Mexico that follow this channel as well. So I'll get questions like when we do the dating topics. Well, do you guys work with Mexicans too? I was like, yes, we live in Mexico. So
100%.
Do you do all languages, or is it like more of a methodology and language coaching of going through the process?
For me, it's more
I've been through the process
that can kind of be adapted to any language. Like we just started with English in the beginning of the year, and I'm taking the same methodology I've taken for Spanish that I've been teaching for 5 years now and applying it to English, that like same structure. And like, I've got it all written out. If you guys wanted to take a look at it, I could definitely send that to you. But, it's the same I've applied to like learning Arabic. It's the same I applied when I was learning Portuguese. It's the same I applied with Italian. It's the same thing I'm applying with Japanese right now, of like going through that same methodology, and obviously like each language has its own like unique bits that you have to learn how to deal with. But again, the basics are more
in Spanish.
The subjunctive is. And the subjunctive, I think, is people get freaked out by that, but in all reality, that's not really that big of an issue. Like, it is important if you want to like speak correctly, right? Absolutely. But at the end of the day, if you don't use the subjunctive and you use just the regular tense, like it's 90% of the way there. It's like the difference between saying instead of "Hey, can you pass me the salt?" saying like "Hey, can you pass me a salt?" Like it's just such a small difference that it's like they're still going to get what you're saying. They're going to give you the salt, And
the different conjugations are so subtle that like maybe if it ends in an A, then it becomes an E. Like those sounds are so close that if you're speaking quickly, people can't really tell.
Exactly. And that's what I was saying. It's like it's so close. Like the difference between like hablamos and quiero que hablemos, like it's relatively the same. So at the most, they're more than likely going to be like, maybe I just didn't hear him well. Maybe my trick is always like just mumble a little bit as you kind of go around that letter. If you're not sure, they're going to fill in the blanks. So it's not really that big of an issue. And, at the end of the day, it's about communication. It's about being able to talk with people, being able to go out, make friends, work a job if that's what you're doing, and enjoy your time here, and that doesn't come with sitting there and studying grammar from the very beginning.
And guys, those of you out there that are on the fence, or you're thinking like, oh no, I might not be speaking at a very high academic level, audit your own usage of your native language. So for me, I can speak in an academic level. I've worked in corporate consulting for years, and when I'm on consulting mode and put that hat on, there's a different way in which I show up and present myself. But I'm with my boys, I'll say gonna, wanna, things that are technically incorrect. But we all understand each other, and you'll notice when you start learning any second, third, fourth, whatever language, that Colloquially, people don't speak prim and proper at all times. You don't even do it in your own language. I don't do it in my own language unless the situation calls for it. So, give yourself a little slack, give yourself a little leeway also. I think learning languages are super fun. I know at some point I'm jealous that you're a true polyglot. I always say 3 days in Italy because the mutual intelligibility between Spanish and Italian. 3 days, my ear attunes to the new rhythm. Spanish is a phonetic language too; it's rhythmic. So for any musicians out there, you should be able to pick it up quick. But
For
once
sure.
my ear got tuned to the rhythm of Italian, I realized, oh, I can communicate in Italian. Or I'd always tell them that we'd start in English, and I'd say, hey, let's do something real quick. I'm going to speak very slow Spanish with Italian rhythm, and then you speak to me back in Italian slowly with what you think Spanish rhythm sounds like, and we can talk to each other. They're like, oh, no way, no way. Like, let's do it. It works with Portuguese as well. Portuguese friends are like, I've never formally studied Portuguese. I was like, try this. And then we're having a conversation like, oh, dude, no way. I was like, yeah. So
That's
when I learned Spanish, mutual intelligibility was huge for me. I think I had a teacher. He said, I forgot what it is. Like English and Spanish, like 43% mutually intelligible. It's like, okay, those connecting pieces, what are they? And Anthony, you've probably seen this. So like, I use the example on this channel: education, educación, institution, institución. Like, guess what, guys? You now have like they all fit that rule. So now you have hundreds of words that you just know immediately.
No,
I
100%. If you like pay attention to those cognates, you can pick up
yeah,
easily 100 words in like a day. And there's like 50 of them that you can just pick up, and you're like, okay, I would have never pulled that word out of nowhere, right? But now that I've seen it, I've got it locked away, you know. And it's funny you say about the mutual intelligibility thing, because I saw this in Argentina where there was a couple of Italian kids and they were like having full on conversations in Spanish, and I was like, you speak really good Spanish. He's like, no, I don't. I'm just basically speaking Italian, but I'm just kind of Spanishifying my Italian, and it's good enough to like
yep.
maybe a word or here or there that's not the same, but uh, close enough. And as far as like language learning goes, like you're saying, like the level of language, right? Like I would say we're pretty boring people, right? Like we go to the same 5 places most weeks, and we go to do the same 5 activities most weeks, most days of the
Same
week.
conversations.
And so like as if once you can get the handle on that, which you can pick up pretty quickly, it's like, okay, that's what I'm gonna spend 80% of my time talking about. It's the Pareto principle, right? Like I'm gonna spend 80% of my time talking about the gym, talking about going into the surf, going jiu-jitsu, whatever it may be. That's what I need to learn to talk about, right? Versus like, so why do I care if I can talk about art history or architecture when I'm very unlikely to
Yep.
talk about that in a normal.
You'll tell the same stories. Like people, when they see me, like, oh, you go to the gym, they'll ask me the same questions. But I rarely ever pull new anecdotes out. And then actually going back to that tip that you had earlier, if I'm experiencing something new in the moment, then I'll be telling the story in my head as I experience it, especially if it's a negative situation. Otherwise, I'm reframing it in the moment. Otherwise, it's going to be a terrible experience, and I'm gonna deflate all my momentum in life. So even if something really sucks, I'm just kind of biting my tongue, making a funny story in my head. So by the time someone asks me, like, "Oh, hey, what was that like?" I've already rehearsed it a million times mentally. I can just spit it out real quick and not really give too much thought or effort behind it.
100%.
And
100%.
then one last thing I wanted to mention, guys. Also, I know a mistake a lot of new people make is like, I need to sound exactly like a local. So when I first got here, it's like, I need to talk exactly like people from Guadalajara. And then as I started traveling more around Latin America, have friends from South America, Colombia, I realized if you've ever been to Panama, they swallow their consonants like, "Que opa, que oma, hey, oi." And I realized, oh, that's kind of like from the physical structure of their face. So for me, when I came across Spanish speakers that have more of a similar ethnic background of me, although nationally they're Argentinian, Uruguayan, Chilean, usually from more South America. I realized the way in my head that I would have said things in Spanish in the early days, I'd restricted myself and thought I have to say it how a Mexican says. For example, in English, what we use a lot of times, like, oh, I've seen that movie 5 times. Oh, ya he visto esa película 5 veces. They speak more like that in South America, whereas in Mexican Spanish, like, oh, vi esa película. Like they don't offer up that additional information. So I I speak a Spanish that to me makes sense for the way I think and the way I interact with the world, and it's not necessarily 100% Mexican Spanish. And a lot of times, like if I meet someone from Paraguay and they say something, I was like, you know what? That's the way I've always wanted to say it. Now I know it exists. That's the way I'm saying it from now on. I'm not going to say it the Mexican way anymore. So, you have flexibility in the way in which you use the language too. It's really just a tool. Don't hold yourself to any steadfast rules.
I made that point with in the video with Joel actually of like, you know, every country speaks differently. There's a thousand ways. It's like the same with English, right? Like the British speak different than the Australians, than the Scottish, than the Americans and the Canadians, right? Like basically any way you can possibly say it, it could probably be said and probably has been said. Like
Just get the meaning.
you guys aren't out here to be spies. You know what I'm saying? Like if you were a spy and you had to like infiltrate Mexico, yeah, you need to speak like Mexicans, right? But other than that, like you guys are just out here to have a good time and like enjoy your life, right? So with that said, you don't need to speak perfectly 100% like a Mexican. You know, you can speak, you can bring out like an Argentinian phrase, or you could say "pura vida." You've been to Costa Rica and you like that phrase. I'm a big fan of like the saying of like, I say this all the time to people. I'm like, I'm not Latino. I don't feel like I need to, you know, stick to any one, you know, Spanish accent. I can kind of copy them, and I know their slang and whatever, and I can kind of get by if I'm in Chile or Argentina or whatever. But like at the end of the day, I'm not Latino. So like if I like the expression "pura vida mai," I've been to Costa Rica, and I thought that was a sick expression. I'm gonna start using that all the time. You know, like who cares? At the end of the day, it's not
English.
fool, like you said. You know, it's not like you're not getting graded out here. You know.
Yep. I've lived in Texas. I've lived in Washington, California. I've been all over parts of the U.S. So I notice even with my family that, or if I watch these things back on playback to improve my speech even in English, I'll realize, oh wow, I picked that up from California. And you don't realize you're doing it in the moment, but I know, especially when I go see my family, I realize, okay, I probably spoke like that when I was a kid, but I don't speak English like they do anymore because or especially when you live abroad, most of the English I speak, or I work in the corporate culture, usually leading global teams. Most English I speak is with ESL people or English as a second language people. So even from there, I don't hold steadfast to a California way of speaking or a Texas way of speaking. But every now and then a y'all will slip out. Okay, well I was born in Texas and I lived there for 10 years, so it's probably in there somewhere. But I don't hold myself to specific standards in English either. So a lot of times I hang out with a lot of South Americans, Colombians, Venezuelans, Argentinians, Chileans. I like the way they speak. I like the rhythm. It's easier for me to speak that way. It makes sense in my head the way they communicate things versus the way a Mexican might communicate the same meaning. So I just go with the path of least resistance, and it's always worked for me. I've never had someone scratch their head and be really confused, except for like I went to Colombia once and I asked for they call them palomitas in Mexico for popcorn, and I asked a girl for palomitas, and she's like, "What?" She was thinking pigeons, and I'm like, So they call them crispetas in Colombia. So you'll have little things like that. You'll have that from English to Spanish, from English to whatever new language. You'll say things that you think make sense in your head, and you'll just look at the face of the other person and be like, "Dude, what?" And then that's a point of, you know, of opening that intercultural bridge and sharing meaning and having a good laugh. And I always realize when you're starting a new language, it's like you're a little kid again. So think of like little kids, you know, at home. I've got little nieces and nephews. They'll say the damnedest things, but that's pretty much, you know, you're in a big person body now in a new language. You're gonna make all those mistakes, and everyone knows that's a part of the process. So just have a good time with it.
And I think that's like a big mental block for people too, is like the idea of like I'm 30, 40, 50 years old and now I got to go back to speaking like a 3-year-old. It's like a big mental stumbling block. But once you accept it and you're like, okay, if I speak like a 3-year-old, who cares? If I get out of the situation when I need to get out of the situation, fantastic. You know, it makes your life a lot easier. One of my favorite confusion words is the fact that in Mexico they call straw, they call it a popote, right? But
Yeah,
like the
I screw
standard
one up all the
Spanish
time.
word is like a pajilla. And if you ask for somebody in Mexico, they have this thing of like albur, right? Which is just like crass sexual innuendo, double entendre jokes, right? If you ask somebody for a pajilla or you ask somebody for a chaqueta instead of a chamarra, they're going to make fun
Yeah,
of you for asking for a. I'm not going to, you guys can look that up. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that on this,
yeah,
but
yeah. In Colombia Spanish, instead of fila, they say cola for line, but in Mexican Spanish, cola, you know, could be something else.
so funny. There's
Yeah,
this song. It's like "Qué difícil es el español," where he like makes these jokes about this of how the words change as you go from one country to another. But at the end of the day,
yeah.
it's like, you know, if I'm hanging out with somebody from like when I was in college, who's from inner city Chicago, right? Like his slang, I might not necessarily understand right off the jump, but given the context and what we're talking about, I'm like, bet means okay. That's dope means okay. That's cool. You know, like you kind of figure it out. You know.
Yeah, I always say you'll notice when I lived in Guadalajara, they would always say like sale for everything. Like, hey, nos vemos mañana a las nueve. Sale, sale. Or when you're backing out your car, sale, güero, sale, sale. When I lived in El Salvador, it was vaya. So it's like, hey, nos vemos hasta mañana, vaya. In Mexico City, it's vale. And so like when I'm texting, and it's like okay for us, like, oh, okay, okay, okay. But every, like, even within Mexico, every city has their own thing. Or I heard someone the other day talking. They said, "Ay que curada." I was like, "Oh, you're from Tijuana," because you don't hear that at all in Mexico City. But I lived in
Hmm.
San Diego, California for years. If you hear curada, curado, you're like, "Oh, they're from the north of Mexico," or like border cities.
Hmm.
So those are the fun little nuances of language. We have them in our own language. When I travel across the U.S., I hear new things. I'm like, oh, it's endearing. It's charming almost. So for me, it just fits in that larger fun box of learning new languages and diving into the way in which people make sense of their world and communicate meaning with each other. So it's all a process. It's all fun. Get out of your own head. Get your ego out of the way. Like we were talking earlier. Oh, they're all talking about me. You're not that special. You're not that important. Just go. Give it an honest to God effort. Have a good time, and you're gonna have a good time if you approach it from that aspect.
For sure. Like, like again, going back to like, it's okay to talk like a 3 year old in the beginning, and it's okay even when you're like kind of at that intermediate level to talk a little bit like Tarzan. You know, you forget an L or a la or whatever. You say in martes instead of el martes. It's okay. Everybody knows what
All
you're
the
saying.
prepositions, I mess up all the time. Or with the el law thing, then I'm good enough at grammar to where I just, if I'm not sure if it's feminine or masculine, the word, then I'll just set it up grammatically to where I don't have to worry about it, to where I don't have to use that, or just pick
Pretty
a different
advanced trick
word.
right there. I like that.
Yeah, exactly. I do that in English too. Or there's certain words that are hard for me to say, like physically, they're hard for me to reproduce. So I just pick a different word, or I just refrain from using that, and then I don't have to worry about it. If I hear it, I know what it means. I know how to use it, but the mouth just kind of trips up on itself sometimes.
There's a joke, right? Like if you don't know if coffee is supposed to be el café or la café, well, you just order dos cafés and then you don't have to worry about it, you know?
Yep, exactly. Yeah, one's the place and one's the drink. That now I'm scratching my head, but yeah, that way to avoid it. Let's do rapid fire. One last quick question. Donzer, do they require a motorcycle license there? Can you use a regular driver's license? I'm not sure. I don't have a motorcycle here. I use my regular driver's license
The U.S.
pretty much
license
anywhere in the world.
is pretty much valid in Mexico wherever you go. Obviously, wherever you, in Mexico, Mexico City, you definitely kind of have to have everything in paperwork wise in order. But
Yeah.
like Puerto Escondido, I haven't done the registration on my bike for a minute now because it doesn't matter. Like nobody's just randomly stopping you, and if they do stop you, even if you do have the paperwork in order, they're still going to get the little bribe out of you. So just give them 500 pesos and be on your way. You know, it's easier than sitting there and deal with it. So
Yep, in Mexico City, it's the same way. You can go to the website. There's a whole process. They do. It's like California. They do the emissions and the inspection. You have to have this sticker, and there's certain days you can't drive. Or I just go to my mechanic and I tell him like, "Hey, I need to not be pulled over and have any hassles. What will it cost me to like just you just take care of all of it?" And then it's 500 pesos. That's like the standard now. It's funny with the exchange rate. It was 200 back when I lived in Guadalajara, back when it was 10 to 1. But 500 pesos, just have a bunch of those bills ready, and then just hey, like if a cop pulls me over and scans his QR code, I need to pass emissions. I don't care how it's done. Oh yeah, 500 pesos. I'll have it done in 15 minutes. Great. You know, yeah, my car actually does pass emissions because I don't like stinky exhaust.
everything's
But
on sale if down here. Corruption in the
yeah,
U.S. is only for the big spenders, you know, like politicians and things like that. Here, corruption's in every man's game. Like anybody can bribe their way out of a ticket.
just to get things done. Or a big one is like my building security where I'm at. It's like, hey, we have to register all people that come in and out. I'm like, okay, if it's delivery people, cleaning lady, yeah, get it on record. But if it's like if I'm coming home after being out and there's a lady friend with me, she's not going on the registry, and then so they kind of met me halfway. Well, as long as you're physically bringing someone up, then they don't have to register them. But if we're going to allow them access, we're going to register them. I was like, okay, cool, I agree with that. So, yeah, the rules they're a little more flexible here, but still watch your p's and q's. Again, I can get into the cultural stuff all day long, but I think start wrapping it up, guys. If you're watching this after the fact, feel free to reach out to us. Any questions, Joel? Anthony, I'll have him put your stuff in the description, our stuff in the description. Definitely, I personally love these types of intercultural, interlinguistic type conversations. So you're definitely welcome to come back anytime. Let people know what you're up to, where they can find you, how they can reach you, and then we'll go ahead and close her out.
Yeah, so for classes and things like that, there'll be a link down in the description below to schedule a call if you want to chat about language lessons. And then Nomad Language Academy on any social media, as far as Instagram, TikTok, or the website, nomadlanguageacademy.com. And then we've got group classes, we got private classes, we got an online self-study course if timing is a little bit of an issue. And then if you want to go follow the YouTube channel, I'm getting more into like some longer form documentaries there on like just Mexican culture, different things, different like indigenous groups and the artisan stuff that they do all over the place in Mexico. So those will start coming out this year. So that's just Anthony Mollis on YouTube if you want to go follow that.
All right, that should wrap it, guys. Once again, like, comment, share, subscribe, refer to a friend, leave any questions down below, reach out to us in the description. We are easily findable and friendly people. And until next time, I shall bid you all farewell.